here, and our other Indigenous guest speakers here too in person. I'm glad that at least one could join in person. But I'm so happy, Anne and Zach, that you are able to be here and share your knowledge and expertise, and that you agreed to participate virtually, because it's almost always challenging, right? Because there is always something, even though you try to prepare in advance. So I don't know if we should start at some point, perhaps. Right?
Okay. Were you able to join in?
So it says attendees 1 or
What is the error that you received?
perhaps she could join over the phone. I don't know. It's not ideal, but I don't know if we can wait for longer.
I'm not sure because
I shared the link with her. I mean the Zoom
yeah, the
link,
link
and
is
all the
situation that the link, when you click the link, it's not working.
Oh. Okay. Does she have all the phone numbers?
By any chance, would you be able to join by phone on the information on the invitation?
Should I resend the email? We should start at some point.
Yeah. Give it a second.
And Valerie is joining from Alaska. Bless you. Do you see me and Denis, Anne and Zach? Do you see us? Because we see you very well.
We're currently seeing an image of each other on the bigger screen.
Oh, so you don't see us?
Just a tiny image for me.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
They might be able to change that on view.
No, yeah.
Different view.
I don't want to interfere with what he's doing right now.
There we are. Not quite close, that's not.
Yeah.
Now
Better
now everybody can see you too, as well as us.
Can I do anything? Actually, my personal technical help is going to be here at 11. Perhaps we could start already, and yeah, perhaps we could start with introductions if you don't mind. Perhaps I could ask Denis to introduce.
You're not going to introduce me?
No.
Hello, everybody.
Don't know anything about you. So,
I'm Denis Ohearn. I'm a professor in the sociology and anthropology department here at UTEP. I am a member of the Kawalangan tribe, which means the sea lion people of Unalaska, one of those many islands that go between Alaska and Russia, Siberia. And I've been doing work on enslavement of the people of the Unangak people, that's the people by the sea, of the Aleutian Islands, and particularly in the Pribilof Islands, which I'll be talking about today, where my ancestors come from. My grandmother was an orphan on St. Paul, which is one of the Pribilof Islands, and then was exiled by the US government. That's a long story that I won't tell today. Thank you. And wound up on Unalaska. So therefore I'm in the Unalaska tribe.
Thank you so much. Perhaps then you could introduce yourself. Hi, Valerie. Nice to see you. Do you hear us? Hi.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Right.
perfect. Anne, would you mind?
My name is Anne Garland, and I represent a nonprofit called Applied Research in Environmental Sciences. And I work with mostly Arctic emergency managers to do hazard science based on their needs and priorities.
Thank you so much. Zach, perhaps you could also introduce yourself if you'd like.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Zach Labe. I'm a climate scientist at a science nonprofit called Climate Central. So, my research interests are very much trying to better understand changes in extreme weather, particularly changes in the Arctic region through sea ice and rapid temperature changes, as well as like how do we communicate and break down all of this complex information about climate science and extreme weather now and into the future.
Thank you so much. Valerie, Waka again. Could you introduce yourself?
Paka, maya ko nga, sa ka ko nga, kipaklo ka ko nga, kakana ka ko nga, magya ka ko nga, alak na kumigo nga, quick pagmingo nga. My name is Valerie, and I come from the Lower Yukon village of Alakanak, currently a resident of Anchorage. I come from the Kwikpak tradition, which tells you that my origins through my mom, which is how we trace our origins, come from the Lower Yukon villages of Alaknak, and all my traditions. When I am in full regalia, I can trace my origins back to there.
Liana. And just perhaps if I could add a few words that Valerie was and remains one of my main teachers and collaborators, and especially when I was there in Anchorage, but still I learned a lot from her in terms of traditional knowledge. So nice to see you all here. Thank you for joining, Kuyana.
Introduce yourself.
Yes, I shouldn't forget to do that. I'm Olga Lauter, and I'm an assistant professor of instruction in anthropology here at UTEP. And my main research interests include, so I'd like to collaborate with Indigenous peoples in Alaska. I'm also interested in, so my PhD dissertation, I lived there for the Denis lands for 4 years. And my PhD dissertation was on renegotiation of urban traditions, the Yupik population living in Anchorage, Alaska. So, and this is how I got acquainted with Valerie, who lives in Anchorage. And so today, you know, I nowadays also I'm also interested in co-production and collaborative research in the Arctic, and the questions of how to build relationships, trustful relationships, whether it's possible to build trustful and maintain trustful relationships with Indigenous peoples. So yeah, again, thank you for being here. I was invited to submit this panel and got accepted. I'm glad it was, and I'm glad that you're all here. Thank you. So if you don't mind, Valerie, I would like to start perhaps asking you to describe, to share your knowledge, if you don't mind, in relation to water, and share what you like to share about, human adaptations, indigenous adaptations, because we all know that indigenous peoples are very resilient and adaptive. So could you share, please, what you would like to share in relation to water, in relation to other aspects, to different ecosystems, in your village, perhaps in acreage as well. So if you don't mind, to speak a little bit about your expertise, about sharing your insights with us.
Certainly, I would. Water plays a very pivotal role from the time we are born until the time we are done with this world. Our life cycle is cyclical in that when we're done with this world, we are reincarnated. There is right now a lot of colonization and missionization that has occurred. So there's a dual usage of our Yupik words, in that when we are born, we are given names of recently deceased people. And we are given those names first by placing water on the batka. We all have that swirl on the tip of our head. We are given water through our mouth, and then 3 times we are granting water back to the earth. That's where we all started. Recently, I heard that that's how we are baptized. So the word for baptism is what's being used to administer names. And I'm like, that's not ever the word that was used when I was younger and growing up. We always had a specific name, and it was called makok. Makok, mak is water. Makok means to administer water, to apply a name, to give a name. And now they call it the baptism of water. So I found that a little alarming. And so I see missionization and colonization creeping in and taking over some of these roles and making it okay to use these words in place of our traditional teachings. And this just happened a month ago. So I wanted to make that point at our last dance practice, that it's not okay to substitute those words. It's not okay to to interchange those 2 words. The other thing is when an animal gifts itself to us, and I've witnessed this many times, that you give it its last drink of water to thank it, as a sign of to send it on its last journey. One other way that we use water is when we alanilik, or have a guest coming in from a different town, which we often do. Our towns are anywhere between 8 miles and 150 miles away. As soon as they walk in the door, you greet that person with a cup of water. And that's to make certain that they drink not only your water, but that, you know, that lets them catch their breath. You're not expecting them to sit there and tell you tales of their journey. You want them to catch their breath. They just went through this long journey to get to your house or to get to your village. You want them to feel welcome and not rushed. So these are all ways that we use water to greet people and to greet the environment. Another way is since colonization and since missionization has occurred, we have who are called little people or other people that you don't see every day. And elders will often say that they are quote unquote creatures of when the earth was thin. And oftentimes those are people that have that don't practice their old ways, that don't hear their birds singing to them and telling them that there's danger about, that don't talk to them about berries, that don't play tricks. So they'll talk about it like how their parents talked about it. I got the money. Oh, in the old days when the earth was thin. Not like it's not thin now. So we use water to reveal that. Where you go out to the tundra, you place water so that those, we call them ichtinaks, those little people, or gajoyaks, those little people that are mischief, to make certain that they're not doing trickery on us. So those are just some of the ways that we use water in our world. So you can imagine we're always carrying water as a way to ensure our protection and our safety. And I know I covered a lot of our basic, our basic ways that we go and walk in this world. But hopefully that gives you a very round it's hard. It's in the morning here in Anchorage, and I usually only speak Yuktoplinap in the morning. It takes me a while to finally speak English after.
No problem at all. Thank you so much, Kuyana. All right. I will pass it on to Denis, perhaps.
I think we have to get the thing set up, but thank you so much for your presentation. It was very enlightening. I'll be talking somewhat about water. The people that I'm talking about are the Unangak, which are usually referred to as the Aleut, but Aleut is the name that was given by the Russians after they invaded and enslaved the Unangak people. Unangak does mean the people by the sea, the people who live by the sea. And the tribe that I'm a member of is the Kawalangan tribe of Unalaska, which is the sea lion people. The people, of course, lived from the sea and in and of the sea because these are a number of islands. In fact, let me see if I can get this thing. There you go. Those are the islands of the what are now called the Aleutian Islands, which go off of Alaska. But the sea was also a place of danger and attack. My fourth great grandmother was, as a child, was a survivor of what was called the Awa'uk massacre, which is sometimes referred to as the Alaskan Wounded Knee, when the Russians came and slaughtered many hundreds of people who were hiding on a refuge rock off of an island which is just off of Kodiak in Alaska. And through several generations, then those people moved. She married a Russian, what's called a promishlenik, which was a fur trapper. And thus began kind of the beginning of the relationship between the Russian colonizers and the Naga people who were enslaved over generations. And I'll be talking about that some today. But you can see on this map the Aleutian Islands. And the main islands that I want to talk about are the ones at the end of those arrows, the Pribilof Islands, St. Paul and St. George. Of course, those are the names given to them by the Russians. And they were never inhabited by people, by humans. They were inhabited by northern fur seals. Millions and millions of northern fur seals came there during the summer to procreate, and then left during the rest of the year. But when the Russians found out that they were there, because they were basically hunting sea mammals for their furs and for the money that would be gained from the furs, they forced about 300 people from the island of Unalaska. You'll see the two arrows there on the island of Atka, to go in 1789. They were forced to live on the islands of St. Paul and St. George to kill fur seals and to slaughter them for their furs. This was something that the Unagac people never did. They never wore fur. It was something which was totally alien to them. When they killed sea lions, they used every part of the sea lion for boats, for medicines, for various other things. But the fur seal was something that they did not use. So here we have a picture of the killing of the fur seals. They would be driven from the sea, sometimes as far as 7 miles across a rocky volcanic ground, and then killed by beating them over the head. Another thing which was alien to the people. Then they would skin them. A skilled Unagac man could kill and skin a fur seal in 3 minutes. And then what was left, let me just go back. Stop it. Back. Here we go. You'll see there that this is called the killing ground, and it's where the seals were killed. It's right below the village. Thousands and thousands of seals are being killed, slaughtered, and then their bodies, what remains of them, is being left below the village to rot over 3 years' time. So you can imagine the stink and the awful thing which the people had to put up with from the killing of the fur seals. And then the women would go out and take some of the meat, because it was the main subsistence food for the people. They had not eaten fur seals until they were forced to go to the islands. But of course, many tens of thousands of fur seals were killed. They couldn't eat all of those, so most of them were left to rot on the killing field. Here's just a figure, and this is some figures I put together from the archive. Under the Russians, the numbers of fur seals killed were at most about 30,000. But when Alaska was sold in 1867 and the US took over these islands, they decided to introduce new, efficient, capitalist ways of killing the fur seals. And as you see here, the number of fur seals that were killed on these two small islands by 300 people, actually 70 adult men, rose from about 30,000 to over 100,000 per year. And not only that, it was no longer done over 5 months or 6 months of the year, but it was done in 2 months, so that the US managers could go home to their warm beds and fires in California and New England. Just very quickly to give you an idea of the traumatic outcome of this. This is a quote from Ilarion Merkuliev in his book Wisdom Keeper. The men of the island work brutalizing hours killing seals for the federal government, sometimes 17 hours a day during the 3 to 4 months of summer when the seals returned to the island. While they had a breakfast of pancakes, powdered eggs, and bacon, the rest of the day the workers had meager rations to fuel their bodies. They only had coffee and a sandwich during their lunch and coffee and a sandwich after 5 p.m. To these sealers, as well as the men who worked in the village, it was not uncommon to hear the agents bark commands while saying such things as, "You stupid Aleuts, it takes 5 of you to dig a ditch." Or, "You think you're so smart, get on the garbage truck." For years, day in and day out, the men were subjected to these kinds of verbal abuse. The only time the men were left alone was on the weekend, when they perhaps let off steam from the indignities they suffered by drinking piva, a homemade brew that they made in 50-gallon barrels. The brew was mixed with raisins, sugar, fruit, and potatoes. It was awful stuff, but the men, joined by their wives, would drink to a stupor every weekend. Except for just a few families, the entire village of adults would be drunk. The men frequently got into fist fights, and I remember once seeing my Uncle Eddie on the floor after being knocked out by Tracy, a family friend. It was not a safe place for kids during these times, especially for girls. I say that because now this was a memory from the 1960s when Ilarion was a young boy, but this is also something which was unfortunately going on from the 1870s when my grandmother was an orphan girl and suffering from these traumatic things. And of course, this is not to blame the people who were being forced to kill 100,000 sentient beings every year over a very short period of time. But the traumatic outcome of that, you can just imagine. But we're here today to talk about what's happening now with climate change. And things began to change with the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1972, which created Alaska Native corporations. Instead of reservations that we're used to in indigenous areas in the lower 48 states, corporations were created by this act of the US Congress and Senate. And the corporations were given a little bit of money to basically invest in things to try and create an income for the people of the islands. And this was seen as recompense for the things that had been done to them by the US government over all of these years. So they created Alaska Native corporations. People that I have spoken to say that the Senate admitted that they did this because they knew the corporations would fail. And then the Alaska Native people would be out of their hands. They would be able to wash their hands of it. They didn't fail, but one reason that they didn't fail is because the corporations invested in a lot of military activities. And unfortunately, not the Unanga Corporation, but some other corporations, for example, are running ICE detention facilities. And unfortunately, against all of the indigenous ways, are involved in some really horrific things these days. And we know what ICE has been up to. The people of St. Paul, this island, enslaved island that I've been showing you pictures of, were in the TDX Corporation. They were a traumatized population, as I've said, given their land back, so they now own the island, both between the tribe and the corporation, they own the island. They have tribal rights, but they have very few resources. The whole area of the Pribilofs in the Aleutian Islands has been described as an empire of extinction. From the time the Russians arrived in the 1700s, there were a series of extinctions of fur-bearing sea mammals that were taken for their furs in order to raise money, and were killed and slaughtered by enslaved Unanga people. The Steller sea cow was the first to go. The sea otter was nearly eliminated, but has recently seen a resurgence. So we now have the sea otters. If people have not seen them, they're very cute little guys. And there was a severe decline of the fur seal population as well. And at the same time, of course, when we're talking about extinction, a decimation of indigenous sea-based skills, the ability to go for hundreds of miles on the sea in what we would call kayaks. Language, which was wiped out, and culture. On the good side, of course, these are things which are being reintroduced, and people are fighting very hard to reintroduce, particularly the language and certain parts of the culture. The seal slaughter only ended in 1985, so this is 2 centuries of basically enslavement and the forced killing, mass slaughter of sentient beings against the indigenous ways of the people. This was done by the Fur Seal Act, and then there started a nice kind of coalition with NOAA, which of course now is one of the latest victims of being doged by the Trump government. But NOAA has actually done some very good things in the Pribilof Islands. And then in 1989, 4 years after the end of the seal slaughter, Trident Seafoods opened a crab processing facility on St. Paul. The snow crab, you will know from, what is it called, The Most Dangerous, that TV show, The Most Dangerous Game, or whatever it's called, which is basically about the most dangerous catch, yeah. Deadliest catch, which is about basically the catching of the sea crab. And much of that program, which I'm told is very popular among particularly men, it takes place both on Alaska and on St. Paul, where the crab are taken for processing. So from 1989, that was basically the only thing that the local population, after all of these years of enslavement, had as a means of employment and survival. But then we have the situation of climate change, and I'll just go through this very quickly. NOAA begins doing studies from 1972 to 2022, over 50 years, is that, of ice cover and bottom temperature in the Bering Sea. They recorded a 1 to 1.5 degree rise in the Bering Sea floor temperature. NOAA has said that further warming is expected over the next 10 to 20 years due to climate change. It has been called the Anthropocene, and people say it's human-induced climate change. Others, I think rightly, like Jason Moore, call it the Capitalocene. It is capitalist-induced climate change. We're not all responsible for it, although we are all brought to have a part in this climate change. The result of it has been crab disease, open water algal blooms, a rise in the Pacific cod population, which has moved northward, and the crab is one of its main food sources, and then a loss of plankton, which the crab feed on. From 2022 to 2023, there was a 90% collapse of the snow crab population, which is the kind of sole survival resource of the people in the Pribilof Islands. So from 2018 to 2021, 10 billion crabs disappeared from that region. Trident closed its processing plant in 2022. And there's been a moratorium on crab fishing. They've recently introduced a little bit, but it's at very, very low levels. So what we have is a highly traumatized people. I think that's the end of my slides. Highly traumatized people who were put through 200 years of enslavement and involvement in a mass slaughter that was against their own customs, and now left with very little to survive on apart from some fishing around the place and so on. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Denis. Thank you. And I will pass it to Zach, perhaps.
Sure thing. I'm also have some slides to help sort of guide, and thanks for Denis introducing some of the climate data that I'll be sharing from sort of my perspective. So yeah, thanks for having me. My work really is trying to think about those current changes that we were observing in the Arctic through sea ice changes, ocean changes, the atmosphere, all the entire Arctic system, and then think about what that means for the future. And so one way I like to really communicate this information is actually showing it. And so I often, when I give talks about all the changes that are happening within the Arctic region, I actually like to start with this particular visualization, and I intentionally leave out all of the numbers, the labels, and then the units and everything, because I really want you to focus your eyes on the colors. And so to help sort of guide what you're looking at 40 some little maps of the Arctic Circle. So at the bottom of each little map in the circles is northern Canada, Alaska, Greenland, and at the very top of the map is Europe and Siberia, Russia. And so each map you're looking downward at the North Pole, and you're probably seeing the patterns of colors being blues and reds, with a lot more blue at the top row of these circles and sort of more reds at the bottom. But there's regional variability. So you can see some areas of blues, deeper reds. And so then I will start adding some labels. So what are you actually looking at? You're looking at temperature departures, or temperature anomalies that we often call in climate science. What that means is that anywhere in red, you're looking at temperatures that are warmer than normal, and anywhere in blue is colder than normal. And so here now I'll finally add the labels after you've allowed your eyes to sort of perceive the patterns of the colors. And what you're looking at is temperature data from 1979 through last year, 2025, at the very bottom right. And so this is showing, again, temperatures compared to normal when we have really high quality satellite observations to monitor temperature change in the Arctic. So the idea of by the color is that we're seeing more and more warmer than normal conditions across the Arctic. And there is also very important regional variabilities. So these are things like extreme weather events that have really high impacts. So for me, this really highlights the rapid change we're observing in the Arctic, the rapid warming of the region. Sometimes it's nicknamed Arctic amplification, really the amplification of temperature change, which leads to a whole array of other impacts. And you can sort of summarize all of these impacts with this data. So this is showing, again, data since 1979. On the left-hand side, this is showing average Arctic temperature over time through, again, 2025. The middle, where it's going down, is showing the amount of sea ice extent. This is, again, across the entire Arctic Circle. So again, we can see there's year-to-year variability that's due to things like regional changes in weather. But what we focus on as from a climate perspective is the long-term trends. So we have rising air temperatures, declining amounts of Arctic sea ice, and then on the right-hand side takes a look at the ocean perspective. So you're looking at changes in ocean temperatures, sea surface temperatures, again, over this same period. So the air is warming, the ocean is warming, and this is leading to all of these important ecological impacts. And so, in addition to sort of the amount of sea ice, something that is also very important for Arctic communities and for marine ecosystems is also how thick that amount of ice is and how old the ice is. So this animation is showing changes in the volume and thickness of the sea ice over the last 40, 50 years. And so again, we can see that same trend where there's year-to-year variability, but overall things are going down. The ice is not only declining in the amount of area it's covering, but it's also getting much, much thinner. It's getting more fragile and susceptible to breakup. Again, really impacting coastal communities in the Bering Sea and North Slope of Alaska and across the rest of the Arctic Circle. In addition to changes in sea ice, there's also changes happening to glaciers and to our ice sheets, the Greenland ice sheet. And so what this visualization is showing changes in the amount of land ice from glaciers that is declining from 1950 on the left through present on the right. So we can see that there's been an amplification of the amount of ice that provides really important sources of water, in particular for communities. The amount of snow in those regions are all declining. So there's concerns about water resources as well going forward into the future. And this is data that's been collected by scientists who go and monitor and measure changes in glacial across all different regions around the Arctic. And so all of that extra water that's melting from these glaciers is going into our oceans. And so what this is leading to, it's leading to rising sea levels. So this is showing data from satellite observations since the early 1990s. So we can see that globally our oceans are rising. So this is causing more coastal erosion, coastal flooding for communities. And this is also amplifying storm impacts. So when we do have storms that bring wind and waves, the rising ocean is then amplifying the coastal flooding that these communities around areas like the Bering Sea are experiencing. And we expect going forward into the future, due to human-caused climate change, that we will continue to see an acceleration of rising sea levels due to things like melting glaciers. And for me, the way I talk about the Arctic is, again, my expertise and background is very much in the weeds of thinking about different types of data and projecting it into the future. And this is also my sort of form of storytelling, really trying to find different ways of how do we visualize this rapid change that has so many high impacts in the Arctic, and how do we tell stories about how this is impacting people and ecosystems across the Arctic Circle. And I think data visualization can be one form, not the only form, but one form that can be really powerful for science communication. And to me, this is so important because we know that the Arctic is changing now. It's been already changing. It's going to continue changing in the near future. And so it's important to understand the types of observations that we are seeing and how they're impacting people. And so for me, this is really an opportunity to continue to monitor and support the science and research and work with communities to understand these changes and then communicate those impacts all in real time. And one example that really was striking to me when I first got into sort of this research space was back in the winter of 2018. So on the right-hand side, you're seeing a map of the Bering Sea region. On the right-hand side is the outline of Alaska. On the left-hand side is the outline of Russia. And so during February of 2018, we had a particularly extreme event in the region. And so the white colors that you're seeing moving, that's sea ice. And what happened in February 2018 is the sea ice actually retreated northward into the Arctic Ocean. So normally this time of year, it's still very cold. You get northerly winds that push the ice southward. But in this case, we had such unusually mild temperatures and southerly winds that pushed the ice north into the Chukchi Sea and into the Arctic Ocean, which really led to significant impacts for communities all around the Bering Strait, particularly led to storm erosion from high winds and waves. It led to changes in where walrus and seals were moving to. It affected fishing, and it had really far-reaching consequences for this particular area. And so I was trying to understand the data that we were seeing, both in terms of ocean and temperature observations and sea ice, and try to work with organizations that work with communities around the Arctic to really understand what we're observing and the forecast going forward into the future for that winter. So this is really, I think, an example of how we can think about this data and try to understand and incorporate community observations into the scientific research that we do. And I just want to kind of leave with this visualization going forward into the future that talks about climate change, both globally, but in particular, I want you to focus on the Arctic. So you're seeing these four little globes that are spinning around them. They're indicating the temperature change by year out through 2100 for future projections. But each of the circles is indicating a different possibility of our world, depending on how much fossil fuels and greenhouse gases are emitted. So the bottom right one is the most pollution and most greenhouse gas emission. And sort of the other circles are indicating, rapid reductions in carbon emissions. So focus on really the top of that globe, and you can see there's this bright red spot as we get further and further into the 21st century, highlighting that the Arctic is a particularly sensitive region to temperature change. It has much larger temperature changes than other parts of the world. So depending on the choices we make today, the paths we select going forward into the future will really affect how much change the Arctic system observes. But this is very much a story that is left to be told. And so if you're interested in more of these types of data visualizations, I'm always happy to chat. At Climate Central, what we really do is we try to analyze the data and understand it and break down the complexities of it to help communicate the information through things like accessible visualizations. And if you're interested, I welcome you to reach out or follow along on our sort of weekly reports that we try to understand these rapid changes we're observing in real time. And I think I'll let it end there.
Thank you so much, Zach. And I'm sorry, but I will go against the rules a little bit to ask you a short question, because today I taught a class, Indigenous Cultures and Indigenous Cultures class, and we discussed actually the fact that we may think that Arctic is so far away from our, we are in Texas and El Paso, from our region. But could you please say a few words about how those changes in the Arctic affect other regions, let's say in the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a research topic I've really tried to understand. And we still have a lot of questions about it. But there's the big idea is that we're seeing such rapid change within the Arctic, such significant amounts of warming, temperatures, loss of ice, that this rapid change potentially could affect extreme weather at other locations. So can cause changes in the jet stream, which help to guide storm systems or extreme temperatures across parts of, let's say, the United States or Europe and Asia and Africa. And so we're trying to understand connections between Arctic warming and increases in extreme weather at other locations that have high impacts. And also more broadly, the Arctic is such an important region that I like to think of it as kind of the refrigerator for our planet, helping to keep the temperatures of our planet cooler than they would be otherwise. And since we're seeing such rapid losses of ice and all this warming, that is contributing to amplifying the amount of climate change we're seeing elsewhere, again, due to that really reduction in this refrigerator at the top of our planet. So there's lots of direct and indirect consequences to all these changes we're seeing in the Arctic on our everyday lives in other locations.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zach. And I will pass it on to Anne. I don't see you, Anne, but you also wanted to share some slides, right?
No, I just have one visual that I can show as an example of some of the hazard science that is being carried out in the North Slope Borough, where I work with the Emergency Management and Risk Management Office. I also interact with Port Authority with some of our projects, but I first wanted just to give a little background as to how I ended up working with the North Slope Borough. And it started out actually after 10 years of working with a research center of DHS called CREATE, and my colleague and I would go around the United States and work with and learn as much as we could about how different tribal emergency management was being conducted in different parts of the federal Indian policy communities. They basically asked us to focus on border regions. So that was kind of how we decided which areas to go to. And so in 2007, my colleague and I, who was an American Indian, who's an Oneida, we were at Elizabeth City State University together. That's how we hooked up. But he asked they asked, our research director asked us to go to the Arctic and work with the risk management and emergency management office and do risk assessment with them. And that's when I started working up there. And then in 2013, I went back and started going up every year and decided that our nonprofit could benefit, mutually benefit and collaborate with different funding sources, whatever we could find to help them do hazard research, because most emergency managers do not have the funds to conduct hazard science research. They depend on others and their information, but oftentimes they are not necessarily trained in environmental sciences, or socio-ecological systems. So that is the perspective that we took, and we tried to make sure we had them on board. We had them clued in to let us know and guide us and direct us. So it was always a collaborative effort, and it still is. And as things change, I realized that being up there was an enormous opportunity to see how fast things are going to be changing. That those communities are on the front lines of a lot of the rapid changes and elevated risks. So I wanted to make sure that our nonprofit had a role in helping them deal and collaborate as much as we could with them to help their decision making. So we do applied research. So I've always worked with a local partner wherever I have done this kind of work. So it was pretty much routine for me, but for many years, most people doing work in the Arctic weren't really tuned in to working with local partners. I'm sure I appreciate hearing from our partners here in this panel, and they could probably tell you some of the concerns that local communities often have about research within their communities. But I have always only done it with a local partner. That has been a challenge because obviously staff change, and I've been there for so long. So emergency managers were constantly changing, and so it becomes building a relationship as much as it is hazard research, and constantly building a relationship and making sure you update and revise any kinds of research directions with their input. So we basically focused on the priorities they wanted back in 2013, which was coastal issues like coastal erosion, surges, and also permafrost thaw. So we've been doing that kind of research on the coast of Utqiagvik, which is the main town in the North Slope Borough, the largest town, since about 2013. And we use community-based monitors. So all of our research is done by the residents themselves. We get the funding to help train them and have kind of a capacity building effort every season. So I recruit and train every season I'm up there. And I usually go up in the summer because that's when most of the rapid changes are occurring that are going to affect the coastline. I just wanted to highlight one because granted, I'm on the coast doing a lot of permafrost thaw research and erosion transects. And also we're doing a tundra green engineering study on the coastal berm that they use, for a sacrificial berm that they use to as a barrier for surges. A lot of communities are doing that in the Bering Strait and even in river systems. So we're testing, even experimenting with natural-based solutions. But it's not just me. I have a group of folks that I contract with that are either local or consultants, including Olga, who helps with my social science, socio-ecological risk assessment workshops. So we try and tackle both the ecology and the social reaction, how people are dealing with these changes and hazards. One that has become more disconcerting, and I know Denis mentioned this for the bearing, is harmful algal blooms. So I just wanted to share, we just got an Alaska Sea grant to help to pilot surveys to try and help that community learn what that means for food security. But first we have to get the data, because right now it's just opportunistic data from research cruises every season where they pick up the blooms and they, record that these are happening and when and where, but that's just opportunistic. So we're trying to elevate that to routine surveys in the summer. So I was just going to show real quick the slide, and I will be glad to answer if I can get this up. I'm pushing the share screen, sorry. And I just wanted to give you an example of, let's see if I can find it on the Zoom screen.
Do you need any help?
Pardon? Say again? I got it. Or I did have it. Did it show?
No.
No, not yet.
Okay.
How can we help
Do you have to give her co-hosting ability?
Yeah, but I think Julian already
Elaine, does she
did.
have it? Yeah.
Is Zach finished with his?
Yes, I don't see it yet, Anne.
No, I'm just wondering if, okay, here we go. Here's share. Now, why isn't that going to share?
I might be able to find it because you sent it to me.
Well, I'm
It's on
okay.
the drive for
What to share with app? Okay, window. Let me try that window. Okay.
just in case. To do.
I see the windows, but I don't. It's not giving me the ability to share a window.
Oh yeah, that's true. Could you share it in the chat? And then we'll open it. Thank you.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Anne, I'm talking to you. If you could share if you could share your document in the chat.
Oh,
please.
okay. I can't share the screen.
That's
not going to work.
If you add it to the chat, we could perhaps open it.
Okay.
So you drag the file over to the chat box and then send it.
I will try and see if it will work. Okay. So minimize it, I guess, huh?
I will still go and do.
I don't know if that'll work. Let me see. I will copy and paste it. How's that? Anyway, if I would love to hear any stories, because we're trying to, because obviously having harmful algal blooms is not something that is common to traditional storytelling. So I am very much interested for those who are on here who live in communities that are facing this to know if they have any storytelling examples of, or even current situations that are disconcerting about harmful algal blooms while I'm trying to do this. Do Valerie or Denis have any examples of their communities trying to cope with this as a new hazard?
I don't. Is this on?
Yes, you just gotta place it a little bit closer.
Okay, I don't. I did want to, while you're trying to do this, I did want to follow up with some of what Zach was talking about and what you've been talking about in terms of Indigenous knowledge, because, the scientific stuff is terrific. It's wonderful. And Noah, as I said, has been very helpful. But, the Indigenous people knew this was going on from the 18 teens. 1814, they began telling the Russians that we can't kill all of these fur seals. They're not going to keep coming here. We're going to lose them if we kill them at that rate. And it was only with the incoming of the U.S. And capitalism that they forced the numbers to go up, and then the fur seal populations did in fact decline. But also, the people I talked to on St. Paul watched the ice. They always had ice in those islands. And the last time the ice came during the winter was 1936. And so, I mean, they're quite aware then, and a friend of mine who's a mayor of the city of St. Paul, he shares stuff on Facebook, and he watches the ice come down and shares it with everyone where the ice is as it comes down during the winter. And it never comes close to the Pribilof Islands, but I think they hope against hope, that the ice will return one day. I just thought I'd share that. But, the scientific stuff is really terrific as a way of basically showing, I think, what the Indigenous people have already known. So I'll leave it at that. Good.
Yeah, I put my document, it's a PDF, in the chat if anybody wants to look at it, or if you can bring it up.
You got it.
Thank
Well,
you.
the one bloom that you were talking about, is it the Alexander?
Alexandrium catanellus, exactly. That's the one that seems to be prevalent. Pseudonychia occurring, but that is what we're talking about exactly, Valerie.
So my dad comes from way upriver. My mom is from the lower Yukon, right there at the Bering Sea on the Yukon. And my dad is from about 150 miles upriver. And we have freshwater clams right there at the, we call it the Y1. It's the tide line, right? About 30 miles is where the tide still comes in. And we were able to harvest quite a bit of razor clams. But upriver, where my dad is from, they get a lot of clams as well. And you can always tell where the good pond water is, and the clear water is, because there's clams in those huge lakes. So they were being filtered by the clams in these lakes, and they weren't. They didn't taste like marak. Marak being that mossy flavored water that a lot of the big fish lived on.
Mm-hmm.
And like maniknak and pike. So these are the fish that they have channels that they traveled on. And, the Yupik know about these holistically. Western science hasn't looked at these yet. These underwater, these under permafrost channels that the fish were traveling on. Something that one of our elders talked about was how the smaller fish from the lower Yukon were traveling upriver was through the permafrost. And so that's how the clams were. They have another pipeline. It's not just what you see on the surface. So what Western science was only talking about was what you were seeing on the surface, what you can collect on the surface. That's basically fish and game, fish and wildlife. So what our ancestors knew was, if you go, you take your bilugoks off, you take your boots off, you get into the ponds, you're going to be feeling these. You're going to be feeling, and you can harvest these clams in these ponds that are, 150, 200 miles upriver. those are the ones that carry the clean water. You're going to want to pack water and drink water from where those clams are, because those are the clearest water. My concern, of course, was like, at what is it? What latitude are you at that these are activated? And so I asked a couple of the scientists at a conference a couple of months ago, and they said, "Oh no, these aren't activated only at the sea." And I'm like, but at the same latitude, you're still getting a certain temperature. Aren't they activated by temperature? Because these have been in the sediment for years. I mean, for millennia. So that was my concern, was that these are going to cause damage to the tundra lakes, in a totally different way. That's going to cause damage to this underground system, to
Yes.
the permafrost system. Well, the permafrost is melting too.
Yes. Yes, you're exactly right, Valerie. It is temperature. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No.
Okay.
You're good.
So you're exactly right. It's not latitude, it's a matter of temperature.
Yeah.
And that has been something that was never possible in the in the Arctic or in Bering Strait or the Chukchi or the Beaufort in the past, because it was always too cold for these to actually germinate. It turns out, I think I've shared, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I did share it in the chat if you want to look at that more closely. I won't go through all of this. There's some links in there that help you learn more details, but this was our effort to compile to date what we're trying to do to help understand what Valerie was just saying, because we don't understand what the actual risk factor is. We know that it does bloom even in the Chukchi now, and it has been blooming along the borough's coastline based on research cruises. It's definitely occurring in the Bering. This poster is mostly about the North Slope Borough coastline, but there is an organization that I have linked in here called the Alaska Harmful Algal Bloom Network that you can go to learn about all of Alaska. And it does occur, I mean, not the same species, but it is a phytoplankton. They're natural. Phytoplankton are natural, part of the food web. But if there are certain ones that are in freshwater and or in seawater, as Valerie said, that will become too abundant and actually are harmful to the ecosystem, especially if there's a lot of nitrates and phosphates in the water system. That's what they need. And then the temperature has to be warm enough for them to germinate. And this is common throughout the world, but the Arctic communities have been thankfully not having to worry about this ever before in the past. And although we are wanting to get input, like I just said, about any oral stories, because they may have bloomed in the past. We don't know for sure.
I have a couple of hypotheses if you want to contact me after this.
I'd love to, Valerie. So yeah, we're trying to reach out in our risk assessment workshops this summer and next year with our grant to ask those questions, try and get some oral history about what people have observed in the past about anything similar to this. So it's become a rapid new hazard in the Arctic, and not many people understand what the forecast is, I guess. So we're trying very desperately to do this with routine surveys for the next 2 years, hoping that we can keep it going. We are training community monitors. We trained them last year, and we trained them in the field work and the lab work so that we can build capacity to have all of that there, so that the equipment and supplies will be in the community so that they can start doing this on their own without, obviously we will be helping them in any shape or form, but we want to make sure it's all in place so that they can continue, because this is not going to end. It's only going to get warmer. And so, obviously, as Zach said, things are changing pretty rapidly. So some seasons it might be pretty bad, some seasons it might not be, but you won't know unless you keep surveying. And this is all affecting the entire food web. So it'll affect the mammals, it'll affect, as Valerie mentioned, the fish and the shellfish and birds. And it's all a big question mark right now. But we're trying to raise awareness. The North Slope Borough's last hazard mitigation plan actually included this in their list of upcoming hazards that they're going to have to pay attention to. So it's we're there to try and make sure we collaborate, mutually learn how to deal with this, with decision making, and risk communication is a major part of that. And we're trying to get boat captains right now to help do the actual transportation out and back. So we're trying to make it a community-based effort all around. So I will be glad to take any questions. Should I stop sharing now?
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Actually, to save some time for the questions, I would like just to probably very briefly speak about one of my projects also in relation to what you have just said. And because now the question is how to build those relationships between local communities, indigenous peoples, and Western scientists in order to solve all the issues what we have just discussed, right? And that's not easy because, different reasons, power dynamics, power inequality, post-colonial issues. And this is what I'm interested in. I started to get this interest in learning on how to when I was in Anchorage, when I completed my field work in collaboration with the Yupik population, also with Valerie. And it wasn't easy to build those relationships because, well, first of all, because in Anchorage, as you, Valerie, know, and some of you know, in Anchorage, indigenous populations, indigenous peoples, they are very spread. I would say that they across the city. And what I try to do is to kind of follow them when they gathered, and also. Valerie, for example, I also wanted to ask you to share perhaps a few words, if we have time, about the dancing group that you're the leader of. And so it really became my interest, and now I'm currently part of this collaborative NNA NSF, which is navigating the new Arctic NSF project. And the title is long, so I'm going to read it out loud. Improving culturally sensitive energy strategies in the Arctic residential buildings with a co-production of knowledge framework. And I work with, it's an interdisciplinary project with two engineers, one civil engineer and one environmental engineer from another institution. And so we work with the community of Togiak, Bristol Bay in Alaska. And I just wanted to share a few words about, those efforts to build relationships, what didn't work. So definitely what didn't work out. But the first year, what we tried to do is simply to try to build some sort of relationship at a distance. It didn't work at all, And then we applied for supplemental funding just to go introduce ourselves, just to say who we are. And we got the funding, and this allowed us, this was some sort of a launch, because then the community, the tribal council, they approved of the project. There was an issue with IRB, which is Institutional Review Board, that wanted us to go through an additional Alaska NTHC review, which is another level. And we found out that it's actually only health-related project are supposed to go through this additional review. But we wanted to hear from the community what they want. What they want us to do. And so they said, no, just don't, we don't want you to go through this review. So anyway, this was this, starting point of our relationship that we are still trying to maintain. So we actually were interested in what the community, to give those, the community voice, right? So we used social science methods like interviews, and also we organized a workshop. Just we wanted to listen to what the community needs are in terms of housing, but also their perspectives on climate change. And so we spoke about global warming, permafrost issues there. They mentioned that, so they're very close to the ocean, to the bay, to water, and there are flooding issues that affects their housing a lot, and it becomes more and more dangerous. Also a lot of windstorms occurring more and more, and also changes in plants and animals in their behavior. So for example, they told us about some bears coming out too early to the city from their hibernation very early, because there is the global warming again and ice melting, and it's really dangerous. Also it changed, so they said that even berries, they taste differently today, and they need to travel far away to get those because there are less and less berries available. And again, the problem is that for this they need transportation, and for this they need cash, right? And we know also about high unemployment levels there in those communities. But at the same time, we were also amazed, by the creative solutions and adaptability and resilience, that those communities have, and this community in particular, in terms of how to, customize their housing. That actually is, it's the indigenous voice is still not yet quite there in terms of the decisions of how to build those houses according to also cultural needs, but also to the subsistence. For example, they discussed that one of the main issues is that they have to subsist, to process food in their living rooms, for example, and it's overcrowded, and at the same time, so they have this issue. They don't have enough space for processing their food, but also for storing it, for freezers. Some of the freezers are inside those living rooms because they do not have enough space. So this is basically what we discussed, and I wanted to share this with you as an example, of this trend. And it's not, co-production of knowledge, this ideal of different knowledge systems coming together to find new solutions to rapidly changing Arctic. That's great, but there's still so much to do in terms of building trust, in terms of finding solutions together. And this is still complicated, and it took us a year just and again, we only we only started this relationship once we just applied for this supplemental funding, because it was not a part of our initial funding, not because we didn't want it, but because we couldn't really explain. And I really love to always cite this this article. I spent the first year drinking tea with the community. Perhaps some of you know about this one, but it's about researchers who tried and who had difficulties in explaining to funding agencies why they needed so much time and funding to build those relationships. But without spending time and funding, there is no possibility to build those and to move forward with finding solutions together. So thank you so much. Let me see. So we have perhaps some time for a few questions from the other participants, if you have any. I also actually had the question to Valerie too, while she was presenting, whether she has any shareable songs related to water. But perhaps I will also ask the others, and while Valerie could perhaps think about any questions. Yes, Maxine. Okay.
So I know you mentioned the project you're doing right now.
Yes.
So you mentioned that there was like an increase in storms. specifically like wind
Yeah.
storms. So I was just like want to know what type of energy is being like used primarily right now, and like what type of energy is being proposed, and like sustainability things like that.
Yeah.
That we can think about right now.
It was actually, so what we, thank you for the question, Maxine. So what we did is that, first of all, we conducted those semi-structured interviews, but then we wanted to organize a workshop to make it more collaborative, and we invited, community members to this workshop to share the data with them, because one of the issues, and we discussed this with Valerie several times, is still that some researchers come to the communities, extract knowledge, and do not come back and share this knowledge with those communities. And this creates more issues with trust, And so what we did, we decided to organize this workshop, and we shared some solutions. We collaborated with some organizations and also with some researchers on trying to find solutions together. Well, suggestions, okay? And one of them is, of course, renewable energy, and they're thinking about building a wind turbine there. But it's now more complicated with the current geopolitical situation, so it became more complicated. So I think it's pending on standby. But this is one of the suggestions that we shared with them, definitely, and solar, of course, as well. But mostly we spoke about wind. Thank you. Any other questions to other participants, to other guest speakers? Any other questions from the audience, or maybe from guest speakers to guest speakers? No? Valerie, perhaps I could ask you, is there any, if there's anything shareable in terms of songs related to water?
I would love to do my grandma's song.
Okay. So it's just a question, and of course I know that let's think about also indigenous data sovereignty. That's why I'm asking if there is anything that can be shareable. But
so this song comes from Galak, and the Galak is a window, or can even loosely translate into a mirror image, is what my mom said it was. So there's a spot on the Yukon that on the north bank had a mirror image on the south bank. So when you're on the delta, it's about a mile wide. And so to have a mirror image on any part of the Yukon was, that was pretty neat. And I can never find this spot. And so it once existed. It was once a settlement, and it was my great grandma's song. So she was one that was a song keeper. And this song was Anlagagaloa. And so you're traveling in a kayak. That's the Aya Yoga. Every time you hear the word yoga, that means your intention is being sent. So it's intention, of course, loosely translates to a prayer. So we don't have a creator. We have a universe. Our universe is what houses and where it houses our ancestors. So we believe in the cyclical, there are cycles. We believe in reincarnation. So when you say yoga, that intention is being sent to the universe. So it'll come back. It always comes back. It's a cycle. And sla is our environment. It can also mean our umyo. So our mentality is also sla. So so this is ancient, right? This is our ancient way of thinking. So let me go through the song, because there's a chorus and then there's two verses. So in my great song, she goes, "Anlagagloa, aya yoga. These are my intentions as I'm traveling in my kayak. As I'm traveling in my kayak. These are my intentions. I was looking around to over there and over there. This is my world. This is how far I can reach, no matter where I am. Wipe your story just like you would a blackboard. Wipe it clear, you're not done, pull it back. You're going to do that twice, and that's a chorus. First verse. Nanita na amhui e. I wonder where. Nuna neryuk I will find beauty today. Perhaps it's on this very calm waterway. As I travel, and looking for those flightless birds before they learn how to fly as I go hunt for my next meal. I hunt with my bow and arrow because this is my world. Uh, Wipe your story just like you would a blackboard. You're not done. Pull that song back. You're gonna do a chorus after that. The second verse is Nanita nam hui. I wonder where. Nuna I'm gonna find beauty today. Nuna pihku unka. It's gonna be on the tundra. I know it. I'm gonna find that path. Now looking for greens that I'm gonna get to pick. So you can tell that the beauty is surrounded by the great outdoors, and it's all due to traveling on the kayak. So let me go ahead and do that song for you. It's a little bit long. It might take about 4 or 5 minutes, so enjoy it. First verse. Nanita nam hui nona neryuk jer konach konach anlagalogar entanam kach besuryulokangach angachangach hayayangach Second verse. Nanita nam hui nona neryuk jer nona pihkun kach jinguler lokach naun ranakach unatak lokach agachanga ayayanga yenge The last verse we sing, we consider our pamya. Pamya means the tail end, and it also means do it one more time.
Kuyana technique.
E.
Okay, Kuyana Valerie. So I would like to thank everyone, thank Valerie for this, for sharing this song. Thank everyone for participating in this panel. Thank you to the audience, to the guest speakers, to Julian and to Anna. So thank you so much for helping to organize this event. Yeah, let's stay in touch. And again, Valerie Kuyana Chaknak, for sharing the song, sharing your knowledge. And thank you, Kuyana, to everyone for sharing knowledge, for asking questions. Thank you so much. Thank you for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad I got to meet Valerie and Denis. I already knew Zach. So thank
I will
you.
connect you if you'd like, Valerie and Anne, for further details.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Bye. I actually have an exam to
Oh, no.
now. I have to run, unfortunately. Thank you, Artemio, for
Thank
coming.
you. Thanks for coming.
You guys did a good job of navigating all the technology barriers.
No,
Oh.
yeah, thank you. Thank you,
I
Julie.
think it was Julian who did most of that.